Hey guys.
Hey,
How's it going?
thanks for sitting down with us.
Yeah, thank you guys. So it's been a year since we did your, what do we call that, pre-ordination ceremony? What were you?
First half of the ordination year.
Yeah, first half of the
That's
ordination year.
Right, yeah.
So we're gonna do a more formal, like, you're ordained now and you're gonna be ministers in the Common Thread world. What does that mean? As far as, I would love to hear both of you guys talk about like what being a minister means to you, because I think in this community it's kind of, we're constantly messing around with terms and things, and up till this point we've had the minister guy, as Doug likes to call himself,
Right.
and you guys aren't guys, and you aren't, so yeah, what does minister mean to you guys?
For me, I spent 20 years in these classrooms in the basements of churches with refugees and immigrants as part of this program that happens in most states, but in North Carolina it's a really strong program. So I had people from all over the world, from all ages, and increasingly over the 20 years I got to the point where what I was doing started to feel more like ministering than teaching, but there were two problems with it. One was that I was the teacher with a capital T, so it felt like the relationships weren't as reciprocal as would be necessary if my own growth was going to keep happening in that capacity. And then second, of course, that's not what I was supposed to be doing. I was supposed to be teaching them grammar and stuff. So I got to the point where I started feeling what people call burnout, but I think was more like I wanted to have a more deeply connected and meaningful relationship with students, and I wanted to have it be explicit what we were doing there. We were forming a community, me and the students together, and we were helping each other along a journey that we didn't call the spiritual journey, but if you're a refugee to another country, a spiritual aspect is present in those classrooms. So then one thing led to another. I found Common Thread. I showed up at Common Thread. I saw If You're Here, You Belong on the website. I started coming. I was here about a year, and then I shared with Doug one day that this past 20 years, and that I'd never known what to do with that until I found Common Thread, because I don't fit into any other churches. I've never belonged to any church other than Common Thread. And he on the spot said, "It sounds like you want to be a minister." And I fell over backwards off the chair, rolled to a stop, and then I realized, that I just didn't know it was a possibility, and I didn't know that somebody like me could be a minister.
Yeah, for me it's a different story. I think I've told the story before. Like, I've known since the time I was 4 years old that I wanted to be in ministry, but I was Catholic, and so I couldn't do that. Spent 10 years in the Episcopal Church, kind of working on discerning a call in my 20s, and for various reasons, the time wasn't right, and I put it on the shelf. And coming to Common Thread was sort of this culmination of spiritual growth in my life, things that I couldn't make sense of anymore, but also answering this deep, deep yearning that's in my heart. I forget who the theologian is that Doug has quoted before, who says, if you can do anything other than ministry, go do that, because if it's not the life for you, it will kill you. But if it is the life for you, nothing else will fulfill you. And so I just feel this, all the things I've done in my life, all the skill sets that I have been able to employ in other contexts, being able to employ them here is such a deep, deep joy. And I think what being a minister is, honestly, is very closely aligned with what being a midwife. Being a midwife, right? Because everybody's got what they have and need inside them, and it's really just our job to kind of be there and support and serve and love and help people access that deep, deep indwelling divine, and listen to that small, still voice.
That's funny because towards the end of my career, I started also doing teacher training, which was great because, again, it was in the basement of churches. So no one was really paying attention to what I was doing. So in the teacher training, the first thing we did in the first week was create these posters where we would draw a picture of ourselves, and then we would try to think of a better name for what we were going to do in these roles, and the group always came up with midwife.
Yeah.
So we decided that if you're going to do this kind of work, We have to have the right label, and
Yeah, that's cool. It occurs to me that like you're relating it back to like this deeply human experience. Like it's like coming along people in their humanity.
Yeah.
Like, and so like because when I think about having a baby, it's like one of the most deeply human things that happens.
Yeah.
And or like being a refugee, like trying to like really, how do I fit into this place? And I think a lot of us, at least I felt growing up, it's just like, what is this world? And I wanted some sense of somebody to walk with me in that process. And so that's what a minister is for you guys. Like that's what you're trying to do. But I think like ordination, there's an idea where like the community, and I think Doug was pretty clear with that when he set it up. It's like, well, this is our commitment to you guys as well. And so like, what does ordination mean to you guys from a receiving standpoint? Because I think that was an interesting point that you made, where you were like, okay, well, before I was teaching and I was experiencing this sense of like midwifing, like, but I wasn't getting back in the way that I needed to. I didn't feel like I could like ask them to give me anything back. And so what is ordination from that perspective? Like, what are you wanting from ordination, I guess?
Well, in terms of the community, I think last year it was really powerful to stand there and have this community be there and supporting us in this. Yes, we are here with you. We are calling you. We are in this together. I think in a lot of churches, most of them, there is this hierarchy, right? You've got the minister, and the minister's got the goods. Whether it's I know what the Bible means, and I can tell you, and I have the answers, or I have the sacraments, and you can't get to God without me. And we are literally all in this together. We're at a fraternal level, which is kind of that new imagining that I have. This is we don't have it anything. Other than a particular heart and a particular presence that we can bring to the community, and the community's right there with us. And I think that ministers and other congregations probably get burned out in different ways because they're on this pedestal and the community can't really be there and be human for them in a way that is absolutely the case here. And I'm just thrilled with it.
Yeah, the first year I was doing the internship that Doug had talked about, every week I would ask him, draw me a pie chart and show me in the pie chart what you do all week. Like how much of your time is devoted to me. I'm a counter 5. Yeah. I'm in my head. Show me a pie chart is my response to most things in life. And slowly over then the last 3 years, I'm starting to realize that there, along with a lot of other things, that there are these two main pieces. And one is, like running the show, so to speak, like creating, as Jack, you have come to say, creating the experience, hosting the experience for others, and then bearing witness to that experience for others. And there's a lot that goes into that. The right paintings, the right lighting. But then the piece that I started realizing from looking at the pie chart, a lot of it is waiting to be asked to come alongside and waiting to be given space to come alongside. So a lot of it is waiting to be needed. And some of, I think, what happens for other people is knowing that you're waiting. Sometimes then they don't need more than the seamless experience that's created. So that was the piece that was missing for me. Like it was, what am I supposed to do? Because the center, the heart of my teaching ethos is you can't teach anybody anything they don't already know. So I have to just create an experience where people find out what they already know, realize what they want to know, and then there I was as a teacher. How did that relate to being a minister? And over the last 3 years, I think I've seen that. And maybe, and I've never seen any other community. So maybe our experience here is the best possible version of these experiences, because it does sort of feel like we're here, we're meant to be here, we're meant to wait. And if we're needed and when we're needed, we're called, and then we show up.
So like you see ordination as almost like, what I'm hearing is like a recognition of like what's happening, like this unfolding, like there's some intentionality. You said, okay, I want to do this, but then ultimately it's like well, is it happening?
Mm.
And Ordination says, yes, it is.
Mm.
We say yes. We come alongside you and affirm the work that you're doing. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Let's see. What has surprised you this last year? Like, what do you think? You know, because it's not like you came into this cold, but like, what has been there's the difference between what you thought you were going to experience and then what you actually experienced. What's the biggest shift in expectations or?
Well, Doug calls it the scut work. I remember at the beginning he said, you know, what do you want to do? I'm offering you this internship. What do you want to do? Do you want to do scut work? And I said, I mean, like, what is that? Like, what is it going to consist of? It's like being an event planner, a communications expert, a registrar. And then slowly over time realizing it's not scut work. That was what we were. If you don't do those things, you can't create the experience in which the transformation can happen. And it is a lot of work.
That was surprising to you.
Well, how do you balance the two? Like, one thing I've always wondered about therapists, like, can you have a client back to back to back to back, and you just go from, you know, so it's not. Recently, the three of us have started being part of this group where on Sunday mornings we get here really early, we turn on the lights, we turn on the heat, we drag the chairs into place, and that's the way it was for a long time. And then we had this idea of then stopping and having a 20-minute meeting where we say, why are we doing this? Like, what is this for? What's the bigger purpose?
Yeah.
Right.
And so it's hard. I find it's hard to balance the two. You can get really caught up in wanting to think of it as a show and as a performance, and then how do you both do those things, make sure they get done, but also remember what's the point of it all, so that it doesn't become, what's that thing about the hand pointing at the moon? In Buddhism, people say it can be a mistake. Instead of looking at the moon, you can start looking at the hand that's pointing at the moon.
Oh, right.
That's been an interesting insight for me.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, I think the biggest surprise for me is I think I've been surprised at how hard it is to take time off to actually Sabbath. I put that on Slack today. It's you know, part of it is I've talked with my therapist about it. As a matter of fact, he's like, "Why? Is it because you just love it so much?" I think that's, you know, I'm like, I think that's part of it, and it's sort of this inner drive. And I know it's not good because you have to Sabbath, especially if you're going to be in working in a spiritual context. It's critically important to one's growth, and so I found that to be surprisingly challenging because there are so many things to do, and I bring this 8 energy to things, and I want to get stuff done, and making sure that I'm carving out that time to be quiet and present for a whole day. I do it every day, and I'm pretty successful doing it on a daily basis, but to set the work aside has been just a little bit more challenging than I expected. So a little bit of a surprise.
Yeah, I want to hear you talk more about Sabbath, because what you're talking about is like you come into the community and you hear the rhetoric that talks about resting, slowing down, you know, it's everything is what is good, like we don't need to change things in order for them to be better, and then you wind up doing the work of ministry and you're like, oh my god, this is like a full-time production, it can feel like, right? And it's just so weird. It's just like trying to think of all the little things, but I think that's something I've really come to appreciate about you, Heather, is the way that the innocence to this process that you bring, because like I think like me growing up in church, like I was like, yeah, church is all work and no fun. And it's you do it because it's your duty to God, and it's not about you, and it's not about like getting anything or healing or anything like that. It's about doing what God wants. I really appreciate that perspective that you bring, where you're just like, oh wow, this is hard, and it's like, that's awesome to have that be a surprise, honestly. And I think that's a real gift that you bring to the table of like, not expecting that that's the case, you know, like thinking like that. Yeah, I just love that, because even in your answer, you're like, well, I knew that was going to be hard, and I jumped into the whole thing. So
and then I had to take one myself, and I'm like, oh. Yeah.
But I would like to hear you. You used a word, a $10 word or whatever, Sabbath. What is Sabbath? Like, what in the? That's a loaded word maybe as well.
Yeah, it is.
So what does that mean to you when you say that in this positive? It sounds pretty positive what you're talking about.
Yeah. Really rest and restoration, and I've discovered I have to take myself out of the context of where I'm doing so much work, which is a little harder these days because we do so much work from home. My office is at home, so it's like I can't stay home because I'm going to feel that call to go in there and do things. So Sabbath is really just being able to shift gears and be in a different space for renewal and restoration. And so I'm learning what works for me. I need to get out of the house. Hiking is a really good thing. It's been so cold. It's been hard for me lately, but hiking and just being in nature is a really good thing. Sometimes I'll go to the chapel at St. Francis because it's a different kind of space and an environment that's different than here, where I can, kind of shifts things for me a little bit, shakes things up, and I can just kind of sit there and be quiet for 10, 15 minutes. Reading books that aren't necessarily connected to my work now, because there's so many things that I've been reading and watching, and I haven't read a novel in years, and so I've just picked one up, and it has nothing to do with anything. And again, just kind of taking myself out of what the usual thing is, because the rest is important, the restoration is important, the spiritual growth, and you don't get new perspectives if you don't change things up. It's very easy to kind of get stuck in have some tunnel vision and not be able to gain those perspectives. So doing that at least once a week is important. And I think it's going to be important as we move along, and we will have 3 ministers here to figure out schedules that we can each take longer chunks of time throughout the year too, when we know we've got each other covered, because that's important as well. Whether that's quarterly or twice a year or something, like we can just take some time away, like Doug just did, because it's really important.
Listening to you speak, I finally have a name for something that's been going on. So there's the external Sabbath. And find hiking and finding spaces to be in. And then there's kind of an internal one that this year is really coming to focus. You can't enter into an experience like this and embrace it so fully without it having kind of a series of dominoes falling internally. So I mean, it's not just that my days have changed in the last few years because this has become my my vocation. Everything has changed on the inside as well, and so I've had to grapple with that. All of my relationships have changed. Me too. I have a therapist. I have a spiritual director. Those things come to conclusions. They come to insights that then both change the internal world as well as the external world. So it's a constant unfolding, and how to make space for that and hang on to the original vision, because it's adapting, and not to get too fixed to holding on to the original vision.
Remember, like in the spiritual life, at least this is where I come from, God is ever growing and changing. There's always new arisings and new unfoldings, and we have to be willing to ride with them instead of like deciding this is how it's going to be. And Sabbath helps you do that. Helps you get grounded and be able to ride.
Yeah, it challenges you either on the one hand of bringing you deeper into like an envisioning of the work that needs to be done, or the rest of it has to happen, right? This goes well into, so I think it's easy when you look at like leadership, and especially we live in a context where it's like we think very corporately or structurally a lot, in these like these structures that we create and kind of plug people into, and so it's like you're the pastor, you're the leader, you're responsible for these certain things. This is a community that is trying to figure out what it is to be human, and so then we have like, like in my body, it's like there's no part of my body that does everything, right? Like my brain might make the executive decisions, but then it gets so much support from the rest of it, right? And so like I think what I would like to know, like something I'd be interested in, is some practical maybe let's start with like your theoretical vision of like what it looks like for a community to work together. Like you guys can't do it all. You and Doug and you guys and Doug can't do everything, right? And so we have a lot of volunteers, and how has like this process of ordination and being like kind of super volunteers, like what perspective has that given you on like your just average common thread participant? Like what do you want them to know about their part to play in this community? And
yeah, well, and I think that this is really what it comes down to. Like we are a community, and everybody has a part, and our job really is to support and hold people up and empower and all of that. I've looked personally at the contemplative retreat as like a microcosm of what this community does and can do even better going into the future, which is, sure, from a leadership perspective, I had an idea and I, came up with what we were going to do, but then immediately kind of went to all of the people who needed to make it happen to see, can you take this on? Can you take this on? And the beauty of it, I think if a minister is kind of doing his or her role, or their role well, you almost don't necessarily even see them that much because life is coming, it's percolating all over the place, and you're really just facilitating what's happening. And so on the day of the contemplative retreat, I had very little to do once we got there. But my goodness, this community, stepped up to the plate and made things happen here, there, and everywhere. And this community can continue to thrive in that direction, I think, if we continue to fill the role that way.
Yeah. And I'm having, when I moved down to the teen room in October, I'm having now the same experience. I stood up, last 48 hours ago or so? I can't remember when it was, but I very recently asked the community to come down to the teen room and help me create this bridge so that, God willing, the teens will walk across it when they learn how to drive and can be anywhere they want to be on a Sunday morning, that they come upstairs instead of leaving the church. And now we're booked out through April. Like all I had to do was to put it out there that I needed it. And now, like, I'm actually having to say people, I don't have a spot till May. But yeah, and again, for me too, it circles back to when I was a teacher for so long. My feeling by the end of all that time was, you create a structure and then you step away, and if you've created the structure and if you step away, people will do it for themselves and they will have a more transformative experience if that happens. So it's hard to build the structure. We talked about that. It's kind of also hard to then step away. Like recently I asked Doug, what would it look like if we had a lay-led participatory experience at church? Because I've never been to any church other than this one, and we're playing with it. We've been kind of playing with it. We've been doing the community intentions. We do the housekeeping. Is it just that it takes the pressure off the leaders, or do the people have a better experience? And I think we're seeing that, like you saw at the contemplative retreat, they have a better experience. It's more transformative. It's deeper.
Yeah, that's awesome. What are specifically, though, to bring back to you guys specifically, what are the areas in which you find yourself needing like support in a general way, like that the community can know about you, like this is how I can always come alongside this person in this way, like because I think there's I've been in ministry or church groups for my whole life, right? And something that I often notice is that the leaders create the container for the people to have these spiritual experiences, and then they don't participate at all. They do not have the experience that they're providing for these other people. And part of that is just a lack of vulnerability or something like that. So what is a way that we can come alongside of you guys and support you in the process of supporting us?
Well, I think we are well positioned to do it, having come up through this community already and already having really strong relationships and being a part of this community. It's not like somebody went out and found us from somewhere and is dropping us in, which is typically what happens in other churches. And so I feel to just continue these friendships and these relationships, I'm very open and honest with people about what's going on in my life. I think that's really important, not to put up some kind of facade that you're tough and you've got it all together, because who does? And I already feel very, very loved, beloved even in this community, and it's really such a gift.
It's awesome.
And this is why your question, this is why I'm grateful that we have the self-awareness program and we have the Enneagram, because Susan 8, I'm a counter 5, Doug is an 8, counter 8, so he leans into his 9. Jack, you're the poster child for a 4. Like I think a lot about the people at our church and the stories I hear and the needs and experiences. And a lot of that I need to do off by myself. I mean, I'm still a 5. I need to crawl back into my cave and contemplate. I mean, one thing I've learned over the last couple of years is I was a born contemplative. I was a contemplative by the time I was 2. And so one of the things that I think we need as people who want to be in these positions is to be known and accepted as a part of the community. So I think everybody knows at this point that you're an 8, you're going to get the stuff done, and that's why you need that Monday to be Sabbath. I'm a counter 5. I am going to sometimes show up. I'm going to buzz around. I'm going to enjoy that, and then I'm going to retreat. But what I'm doing as I'm retreating is I'm contemplating, and then I'll come back. It's wonderful to be part of a community where, like you said, instead of being picked and dropped into a slot, we're not only homegrown, but we get to be a part of the community in a way in which our needs and our particular capacities that we bring get not only accepted and recognized, but we get help with those things.
Yeah.
We get seen.
Yeah.
So like for you, it's almost just the affirmation that like it's okay if it's okay with us if we can't get a hold of you for 3 days because you're busy like dealing with
And we have the language in this community to say what's going on. And I don't think that's super common in a church community.
It's true.
Yeah, I really hope that we can have human leaders. That would be ideal. This community. In a community that's trying to learn how to be human.
Exactly.
We would have human leaders.
Well, no problem there.
Well, this has been a great conversation. Is there anything that you guys want to add, or?
Well, I just thank you, love you, community. Live streamers are seeing this first, but other people have a chance to catch this video, and just what an honor and a privilege. And this is like I said, a lifelong thing on my heart that's finally coming forth, and I just couldn't imagine a better group of people amongst whom I can do this. So
same. All of the various disjointed parts of my life have come together finally in a way that offers me joy, the possibility of joy, and to be able to have that joy and to experience it in front of and share it with others is life-changing.
Well, I've been coming here for 5 years, and when one of the first Sundays I came, Doug talked about, I've got to replace myself. Will we escape the founder's trap? And I think I can speak for a good number of us in the community that, like, you guys, your ordination is a big step in that direction. And, like, really, as a person who's now at this point, like, invested a lot of my time and money into this community, I feel better about the future because you guys have made this commitment to us, and the commitment that we as a community are making to you is
Thank you, Jack.
thank you.
Thank you
so much.
All right.
awesome.